Hello guys, and welcome to my PvP Basics series, in which I will be explaining how to get better at PvP in New World and how to take the correct decisions in different scenarios. Take a note that all of the tips will be based on my own understanding for the game and of course my own experience after more than 6,000 hours. Of course, some of you might not fully agree with my points, but that is completely fine, as I believe that everyone can have his own opinion. The core of the series will be related to Fire Staff and the different gameplay roles which the Fire Staff has. Most of the core mechanics, however, can be applied to other classes and weapons, so I believe the series would be helpful for you regardless. So without further ado, let's jump into episode 1, in which we will review all of the weapons and different classes in New World. In New World, there is a total of 15 weapons at the current moment, with the latest addition being the Flail. As we can see on the picture, they are distributed in different groups, and those groups are named as one-handed, two-handed, ranged, and magical. However, this distribution is not exactly correct, and it's not good enough, as it doesn't provide us with further details to the core of the weapons and their use. Also, thing to note is that all magical weapons are ranged as well. In order to clear out the picture for all new players, we need to distribute the weapons into the below categories, but just before going into the categories themselves, I want to note something really important. That each weapon in the game can be used for different purposes, but in general they all have their best role included into the categories, which I will go over in a minute. Example could be the Rapier, as it can be used as a high DPS one-shot bleed build, but for PvP in the high levels, this weapon is mainly used for defensive maneuvering and escaping tool. Same could be said for the Ice Gauntlet, which can be also used as a damage weapon, but its main purpose in PvP on high level is to protect the user and of course to survive longer. So what are the categories in New World and why they are so important? There are three main categories in New World, and we can distribute the weapons in them. The first category is the damage weapons, which will include all weapons with high burst potential and which weapons are used mainly to DPS other people. The second category should be the supportive weapons, which will provide buffs, debuffs, or, as I said, maneuvering abilities in order to escape tough situations. The last category should include all crowd controlling weapons, or the weapons that are giving us piece of land on the battlefield for a brief moment, in which we will be able to gain positional advantage over our opponents. In order to get the maximum out of every PvP encounter, regardless if that's a 3v3 arena, OPR, war, or just an open world PvP, a team should have weapons which represent each of those categories. We can make an easy example with a group of 5 players by placing one healer, 2 frontliners or so-called bruisers, and 2 damage dealers. They can use any weapons from the mentioned 3 categories, but the more we change the weapons, the more different results we will receive at the end. That's why it's key to know what are the exact strong and weak sides of each of the weapons, as only then we will have the clear picture of what we can achieve with our battle plan for the upcoming fight. So with that in mind, let's go over each weapon from each category and let's see the strong and the weak sides which we need to have in mind before equipping them. The first weapon from the damage category will be the Fire Staff. The Fire Staff is a really high burst damage weapon which can do well in close to mid range. The usual skill tree of the weapon provides high burst potential not only to single but also to AoE targets. This makes it one of the highest damage in the game and considerably one of the best weapons for damage. The weak side of the Fire Staff is that it's lacking any form of crowd control or group buffs or debuffs. The weapon also has a dot effect which is called smolder or burning, which is the weakest dot effect compared to all other effects. You also have only one ability which can be considered as mobility, but the cast time for it is also pretty long. The next weapon from the damage category is the bow. Same as the fire staff, this weapon has really high damage potential and the range that can operate is middle to high. There are different skills in the bow tree which can provide high AoE damage and one of the strongest dot effects in the game. The weak side of the bow is that your attacks can be easily blocked not only by players who use shields but also from players that can block with their weapons. Same as the fire staff, you don't have any crowd control abilities, neither party buffs or debuffs. You have small self buffs of movement speed in order to help you escaping tough situations. Next in line from the damage category is the musket. Same as both previous weapons, the musket has really high damage and can be used on middle to high range. The kit of the musket provides fast attacks which are empowered from the perks of the weapon and also paired with some slow debuffs and burning. The weak side of the weapon is that you will have mainly single targets on your scope as you will not be able to provide any AoE damage. A lot of musket players as well are compensating for their big damage with really low constitution, which is exposing you to a risk of fast death. The Blunderbuss is the next weapon we will take a look at. This is considered to be the best damage weapon as it has the highest burst of damage for a short period of time. The kit of the weapon provides not only good damage on close to mid-range, but also defense in the form of fortify and slow towards the enemies. The weak side of the weapon is that its range is not optimal and most of the times you are too close to the fights. Combine that with the chamber of only 2 bullets and no escaping abilities, you are looking at a really hard weapon to master. The Great Sword once was indeed great, but now it's toned down to normal levels. The weapon still has insane value as DPS due to the increased range of melee heavy attacks and the buff in its own skill trees. It also has chasing potential which is extremely good with a lot of staggers and debuffs on the enemies. The weak side of the weapon is that it's too easy to be kited around and can be countered with high burst of damage due to the animation lock it has on some of its abilities. The sword and shield combination is an amazing pair which can be used in many different scenarios. If we talk about the assassin sword and shield player, we cannot pass on the fact that it has insane gap closer with the leap as well as the good crowd control for single targets. The damage combined with the tracking is also worth mentioning for this weapon. The weak side of it is that you must run full light gear and the round shield doesn't provide you all that much defense. If you don't pick the correct approach towards your enemies, you might never reach them alive. Same as the musket, the trait for high damage is met with low constitution. After some patches which were targeted towards the weapon, the hatchet is not what it once was. The weapon is still good for single target damage in combination with a lot of self buffs, staggering vulnerability and haste. The weak side of the weapon is that you are exposed to enemies without any defense in your kit, and also your attacks and abilities are easily blocked by enemy players as they don't do that much of stamina damage. As we mentioned all weapons from the damage category, let's move to the next one, which is the supportive category. The first weapon we will take a look at is the life staff. This weapon is not the only source of healing in New World, but it is the best one. It has extremely good kit for assisting your teammates with not only heals, but also with fortify and haste bonuses. The weak side of the weapon is that you don't have any escape tools or abilities. At the same time, you need to be aware of the distance from your teammates and if you have vision towards them, as if you don't, you might not be able to heal them. The next weapon from the supportive category is the Rapier. The Rapier doesn't provide any party buffs or bonuses, but due to its amazing mobility, it is safe to say that it supports your main hand weapon. It is mostly used by healers in order to get away from tough situations and to gain distance from enemies' assassins. The weak side of the weapon is that it's mainly used for an escape tool and therefore it doesn't provide anything more than that. The blocking stability of the weapon is one of the lowest in the game, and the repo stability is super easy to be avoided or being countered. The Void Gauntlet is one of the magic weapons which is considered to be the best supportive weapon in the game. It provides a lot of buffs and debuffs which are affecting a big portion of the battle. On top of this, it can also be used for rooting enemies and apply anti-healing effects to them. The weak side of the weapon is that it's extremely mana hungry and it's hard to avoid numerous enemies due to not having any escape tools. The other gauntlet in New World is the Ice Gauntlet. This weapon is also considered as an extreme life savior due to the fact that you have a lot of defensive tools in your kit. It can provide self-cleanse and also short invulnerability, as well as slow and root effects to the enemies. The weak side of the weapon is that the range of effect is not that big and it's easily avoidable. The cooldowns are also something to consider as they are quite high and hard to maintain consistent skill usage. The next weapon is the newest addition in New World, and this is the Flail. As people are still experimenting with it, the information should not be taken as 100% correct. However, the weapon provides a lot of party buffs to the allies nearby the Flail user, as well as damage reduction to all enemies who are hitting the Flail person or the people around him. The weak side of the weapon is that you are in melee range and not always able to apply your crowd control abilities, as well as your abilities are quite easy to predict. And now we can take a look at the weapons from the last category, which are considered to be the best crowd controlling tools. Mainly, they have high AoE crowd control abilities which can turn the tide of the fight quite fast. The first one is the Great Axe. As the name suggests, the Great Axe is a great due to the fact that it has a huge impact on all nearby melee players. The kit of the weapon allows you to pull in close to you all surrounding enemies and provide easy time to your AoE damage dealers. The negative side of the weapon are the slow auto attacks which it does, as well as the slow animations of the abilities which can be easily avoided if a person is concentrated. The next weapon in line is the Warhammer. The big boy is one of the best friends for all players who play nearby the big fights, or as they call them in game, clumps. The kit of the weapon provides numerous debuffs to the enemies surrounding you, and you also have one of the strongest interruptions and crowd controls. The weak side of the weapon, same as the Great Axe, is the slow attacks and abilities which can be easily avoided by more experienced players. The weapon also doesn't have an escape tool, so you have to pick your fights really well. And now, a weapon which can be used in many different roles of the game, but in general has the potential to control territory, I present you the Spear. The weapon, as mentioned, can be used in variety of builds, but in general it's great for controlling the front line of the fight. With a lot of weaken, slows and knockdowns paired with low cooldowns, the weapon is really helpful for establishing control over the battle. The weak side of the weapon is that the attacks are not as fast as we want them to be, and all the abilities have an animation lock. At the same time, it's also easy to predict the next move of a spear player due to the slower animation of the abilities. The last few weapons in this category are weapons which we already looked at. Those are the Flail, Sword and Shield, Great Sword, Ice Gauntlet, and of course the Void Gauntlet. As previously mentioned, most of the weapons in New World are used in numerous builds due to the complexity of their toolkits. Those weapons have the ability to control different parts of the fight by using their debuffs, roots, staggers or stunts, and therefore they have been mentioned in the category of crowd controlling weapons. Of course, any other weapon in the game can also have more than one specification, and this is why the combat in New World is so complex. The variety of builds and potential is extremely high, and the number of combinations between those different builds is huge. So with all that in mind, the best thing to do is to pick your own playstyle and decide which weapons will be the best fit for you. This way you will not waste any time learning something which might not be suitable for you on a later stage in the game. As this was the episode 1 of the series PvP Basics, please let me know if I missed something related to the weapons. Any feedback is more than welcome, and of course I'm always open for a discussion. You can do that in the comment section below, or you can also join my Discord community server. In order to not miss the episode 2, in which we will talk about the different classes in the game, make sure to follow the channel. If you want to catch me live streaming, you can also follow my stream on Kick, where I mostly play arenas, OPRs and wars. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.